Have you ever felt a deep and quiet sense of disappointment when you look at your life? It's not a loud, dramatic crisis, but a slow, aching grief for the story you thought you would be living. You had a dream, a plan, a hope that you held so dearly. Maybe it was a marriage that ended, a career path that closed, a prayer for a child that was never answered, a friendship that betrayed you. You look at the chapter you are in right now, and you can't help but feel that this wasn't how it was supposed to be. The plot makes no sense. The characters are confusing, and you feel like the author of your story has written you into the wrong one. This feeling can be one of the most confusing places for a person of faith. We are taught that God has a good plan, a purpose for our lives. We read promises like Jeremiah 29:11, that He has plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. But then we look at our reality, the detour, the dead end, the heartache, and it creates a painful disconnect. We begin to wonder, God, did I hear you wrong? Did you forget about me? Where is the good plan in this? If you are feeling this way today, I want you to know first that your feeling is valid. It is okay to grieve for the life you thought you would have. It is okay to be confused. But I also want to gently invite you to consider a new perspective, that perhaps the author of your story is far more brilliant and trustworthy than you can currently see, and that He is famous for writing the most beautiful redemption into the most confusing chapters. There is no greater example of this than the life of Joseph. As a young man, God gave him spectacular dreams, a clear picture of a future where he would be a great leader. That was the plan. But the very next chapter of his life was a nightmare. He was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused of a crime he did not commit, and thrown into a dark prison, forgotten by everyone. Imagine Joseph in that dungeon, year after year. Where were the dreams now? Did God lie? Did He misunderstand? His story made no sense. It was a story of injustice and profound disappointment. But what Joseph couldn't see from the prison floor was that the author was weaving a masterpiece. The betrayal led him to Egypt. The false accusation placed him in a position to meet Pharaoh's cupbearer. The time in prison forged his character. Every single painful plot twist was a necessary setup for the final act. Years later, when he stood before the very brothers who betrayed him, he was now the second most powerful man in Egypt, in a position to save the entire world from famine. And he utters the most profound statement of trust in the author. "You intended to harm me," he says, "but God intended it for good." This is the heart of our hope. Even when human authors in our story, including ourselves, write chapters of pain, betrayal, and failure, the divine author has the power to take those exact same plot points and weave them into a story of redemption that is far beyond our comprehension. Your disappointment is not the end of the story. Think of the two disciples on the road to Emmaus just after the crucifixion. Their hearts were shattered, their hope was dead. The man they believed was the Messiah, the one who would redeem Israel, had been brutally killed. As they walked, their conversation was filled with the sorrow of a story that ended in the worst possible way. And Jesus Himself, unrecognized, comes and walks alongside them. He enters into their disappointment. He doesn't rebuke them. He listens. And then He gently takes their broken story and begins to reframe it, showing them in all the scriptures how the suffering and death of the Messiah wasn't a tragic mistake, but a necessary and glorious part of God's eternal plan. Their story didn't make sense because they didn't know the whole story. This is often where we live, on the road to Emmaus, walking in confusion, with Jesus walking right beside us, waiting for us to ask Him to help us understand. The Bible reminds us in Isaiah 55, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways." As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. This verse gives us permission to not understand everything. It's an invitation to trust the wisdom of the author, even when the plot is confusing. So how do we live in this place of trust when our hearts are heavy with disappointment? First, as we've said, allow yourself to grieve what was lost. A lost dream is a real loss. Acknowledge it before God. He can handle your sadness and your anger. Second, start looking for evidence of God's faithfulness in this current chapter, not just the one you wish you were in. Even if this isn't the story you would have written, where is God in it? A moment of peace, a kind word from a friend, the beauty of a sunrise. Practice finding His fingerprints on the page you are on right now. Third, cling to God's character, not to your original plan. Your plan may have been flawed or incomplete, but His character is perfect and unchanging. He is still good. He is still faithful. He is still sovereign. When the story doesn't make sense, hold on to the author. And finally, consider redefining what God's good plan really means. We often interpret it as a plan for an easy, comfortable, prosperous life. But the Bible defines the ultimate good as something far deeper. Romans 8:28 says, God works all things for the good of those who love Him. And the very next verse defines that good, to be conformed to the image of His Son. What if the disappointments and detours in your story are the very tools God is using to make you more like Jesus, to give you more compassion, more humility, more dependence on Him? What if the good He is working is not a better circumstance, but a better you? Your story is not over. You are in the middle of a chapter. Do not make the mistake of thinking it's the end of the book. The author of your faith is trustworthy. He is brilliant. And He is famous for writing endings that are more beautiful, more redemptive, and more glorious than anything we could ever have written for ourselves. Trust the author.